The generic synthwave music you've just heard is an indication that, yes, this is the Motion Racing Podcast. And this time we've got three people because I thought we'd look at BTCC. You know, this is something clearly I've slept on for many years because BTCC has always been there and has almost always been awesome. But I thought we'd invite touring car expert and PR guy and sometimes journalist Neil Hudson, friend of the pod over many years, to talk to us about it. But first of all, Georgie Mackay is with us as usual. And Georgie, after we've spoken to Neil, we'll chat a bit about Race for a Cause 24, the Prismatic Motorsports 24-hour sim race that happened, I think, 2 weeks ago as we record. Pretty exciting. Lots for us to catch up on there. But how are you doing, Georgie? All good today?
Yeah, it's been a bit of a weird context switch to go back to my day job after the last 3 weeks of being off and managing the around Race for a Cause, but you know, easing back into it, and it's nice to come on here and talk about it with yourself and Neil, so looking forward to that.
And the E308 was fully charged to get to work?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it's plugged in right now. It's not charging right now because of course I'd pay more money because it's during the day, but it is plugged in.
Good stuff. And Neil, welcome back to the pod. Lovely to see you and lovely to get your insight. Maybe just because it's been a few years, just let's catch up on what's your main interest in touring cars right now, and what are you mostly working on these days?
Cool. So yeah, thanks for having me on, first of all. I've worked as a journalist and PR in sort of pretty much exclusively touring cars, a little bit of some other things here and there for the last 15 or so years. I was in the paddock for BTCC for about 10 years as a journalist, and a couple of years on and off recently more as on the PR side of things, because that's the way most work goes these days. I still work as a sort of PR and communications manager across various other touring car championships across the world, but BTCC, obviously, you know, as a Brit who grew up watching the championship, is still something I'm very, very close to and enjoy very much.
Yeah. I thought maybe that was a good segue, actually, you know, in terms of nostalgia. Maybe it would be a good place to sort of talk about earliest BTCC memories. Georgie, you're a fairly recent touring car watcher, but can you remember the first time that you heard it really being talked about as something interesting?
I think for me, the first time I remember British touring cars is, I think it was 2019 when they came north of the wall to Knockhill. Abby Pulling was driving in the British F4 at the time, so that made, to me, the British touring cars a bit of a side series, even though it was the main event of the weekend, because I was largely going there to see Abbey race. But having watched it, that was cars off the track, left, right and centre, dooring each other. It was great racing, and I don't think, like maybe you said before we started recording that you thought maybe you'd slept on it a little bit, and I had definitely slept on it myself up until that point. And now I think it excites me as a sim racer to see front wheel drive cars and rear wheel drive cars racing each other, because that's something we tend to see a little bit more of in the sim, and something I enjoy doing a bit of, driving front wheel drive cars and outperforming whatever rear wheel drive car I can, because I have a bit of a chip on my shoulder about it. But you know, that's the perks of being a sim racer. You get to do things like that. But now British touring cars, they're doing things like that as well, and I think that's really enjoyable to see.
Yeah, and there was for a while, I think, in the BTCC there were only front wheel drive cars, so it's really nice that we've got a good mix of cars and a good mix of manufacturers there as well. I'd say my earliest touring car memory was probably John Cleland. This is when, you know, it wasn't regular to film drivers with the radio on. To be fair, I don't think the BBC actually did that. I think he was just so loud when he spoke that it picked up on the in-car camera. But John Cleland basically being unable to not say the F word while he was convinced that was a gap to go for to pass Steve Soper and get past Tim Harvey for, I think it was the 92 title. So going into that race, if I recall, it was Tim Harvey and John Cleland who both had a mathematical chance of the title. Steve Soper was Tim Harvey's teammate in the teal Vickley Motorsport Listerine BMWs. Vickley Motorsport, by the way, later on, of course, found to be drug trafficking, which is a fantastic story if we ever get to it. But thanks to what we have to call, for algorithmic purposes, housery, Tim Harvey won the title and John Cleland was binned in the gravel after Steve Steve Soper tried to surgically remove his door with his car. But fantastic racing, of course. And I remember my dad loving John Cleland as well, because he's a Volvo dealer, or was at the time. And something weird about a Vauxhall driver being a Volvo dealer, but that's how it was back then. I think he always hoped that he would go and race the S40s, but that was a bit after his time in terms of being a peak performer. Neil, what was your first BTCC watching memory?
So mine's a bit strange, because I suppose for me, I watched BTCC way before paying attention to any of the driver names, because basically for me, they matched up to my Matchbox collection. So I used to just watch the TV. I mean, for me, genuinely, touring cars was the first motorsport I watched. I mean, it was the thing I first got into. But it was more like, oh, I've got this little model of a car, and it would have been a Cleland, like STP, Vauxhall Astra, or whatever in my kit. And it's like, oh, here they are on TV, for Sierras, BMWs, all smashing into each other. So that was my first experience of it. And then when I came back to it as a proper motorsport fan and properly got into it more around mid-90s, it would have been right in the ascendancy of the super touring era. So a little bit after the John Cleland man's an animal moment, which I believe you're referring to there a second ago. But I caught, when I properly came into motorsport, when, a lot of things were pretty strong, you're looking like champ car racing in Formula One, having a good run in the mid-90s as well. Everything was sort of amazing. And BTCC was also, as I'm sure we'll get to, suddenly BTCC 90s was a strange phenomenon as an incredible motorsport championship. Something it's always compared back to, but in very strange ways.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird. It's like it's this totemic moment. It's like how whenever World Rallying does a clip, it has to be about Group B, or at the very latest, early 90s Group A, to get anyone's interest. It kind of devalues, I think, the current Rally 1 and the current, the fact that the machinery is actually faster and more powerful than that old machinery anyway. But it's a weird thing as well. When you look at BTC, like if you look at Goodwood's YouTube channel, for example, or if you look at Motorsport Magazine's YouTube channel, the things that pull in the viewers are always, something like Patrick Watts driving the super touring Peugeot, or it's Anthony Reid reunited with his Ford. And so it's that kind of it's that super touring manufacturer era that still seems to grab hold of people's attention. I wonder, why do you think that's sort of pickled in aspect, Neil, in terms of how we understand BTC?
I think it's driven by the fact that simply was an incredible era, but I think it also really hurts the fact that we have an incredible BTCC. In terms of top level, it varies over many years. Sometimes it's higher years and lower years, but it can never compare to that. But also, that era just doesn't make sense. If you look back at it and go, how have we got 8 manufacturers, all the world's greatest touring car drivers, international touring car drivers, all coming to drive around Darlington and, around near Yorkshire and Hampshire and all the way off to near North, Norwich to go race at Netherton. It was just this anomaly of motorsport where that shouldn't really have happened. And it did, and it's amazing it did. But I think it becomes this problem for BTCC because it's like, oh, well, it was all better and we can never get back to that. Yeah, of course. How could we ever kill off all the world's touring car championships and suddenly make the British Series the most important one? It shouldn't really have happened anyway, but it did, and we should be thankful for that. But it sets this weird little benchmark that when you look at current BTCC and the level of competition, it's close, it's fast, it's fun. It does the job as it did back then, just with a more national series of drivers and much more manageable motorsport budgets.
Yeah, and I'd say the John Cleland man's an animal moment that we both referenced, that was almost ground zero for me in terms of when the mania started. So I think people picked up on this almost like a sort of motorsport version of WWE wrestling. It was like there were proper personalities and rivalries, and obviously it was a bit later on when you had the really serious overseas drivers like Ivan Muller and Laurent Aiello coming in. But it was at that point later on when it started to feel like a real challenger for F1, in terms of profile, in terms of sponsorship, in terms of manufacturers being there. I mean, at that point, there was no factory Renault team, but there was in the BTCC. Volvo wouldn't have gone near F1 because it cost too much, but they could in the BTCC. And yeah, you had this imbalance in terms of they were going to tracks with burger vans right next to the circuit, and with I think sections of circuit called things like the bomb hole, which again you never would have got on a Hermann Tilke circuit, and it was fantastic. Like you said, it also drew other touring car championships to ruin. So DTM decided, no, we're too good for this. We've got world class drivers, so we're going to call ourselves ITC and go to Interlagos and Japan. and that killed it. BTCC eventually, reached oblivion in terms of how far Super Touring could go because it just ended up costing too much. But what was the secret sauce that let that era last for so long?
I think as you picked up a little bit, like you say, DTM also set itself up as an international championship, but Germany also had its own Super Touring championship at the same time. Super Touring was basically the global rule set. DTM had its own set and was going its own way. Everyone managed themselves sort of nationally. STCC, which basically copied British Touring Car's technical regulations, also started to grow. The Swedish fans started to really enjoy British racing. They had, Swedish racing drivers over there. So STCC suddenly exploded and became a thing. So, the TCC phenomenon, when you consider that TCC, the only one that is left of that era, of that naming convention, is BTCC, suddenly blew up everywhere. Mainly BTCC's strange sort of bubble sort of created that. In terms of how it then started to struggle was basically because, quite rightly, manufacturers would then say, this is fantastic, we love this formula, but why are we going to race to the UK? We need to get a strong European and international sort of framework going. When DTM failed, ITC, I suppose rather to say failed, then BTCC carried on a bit up to about like 2000, but then you had European Super Touring was growing, STC itself was growing, and that started to dilute what BTCC sort of had. And manufacturers were now starting to also go, look, as you see in any category, when you've got 8 manufacturers in any championship, hold on to them as long as you can. They're going to be there 1 or 2 years, because the 2 or 3 at the back are going to go, we're losing all the time, we're going to go do something else. And when that starts to happen, can you just create a cascade effect? And effectively Super Touring at an insane cost for touring cars still hasn't been beaten really, sort of collapsed at the end of 2000.
Yeah, and then after that, briefly, there was a move towards affordability. I think that's one of the things that started TCR being so popular, which obviously you're involved in now. But Georgie, one of the reasons why I would prefer instinctively to watch a BTCC rather than a TCR series, and I'm not asking Neil to in any way be negative about the thing he works for, but Georgie, is the fact that the BTCC cars look so racy and look so much more aggressive, I think, than most other touring cars out there. I mean, would you agree that the whole grid looks decent there, Georgie?
I'd agree that the whole grid looks decent, but I don't necessarily think I'd agree with the implication that other touring cars don't look racy. I'm a huge fan of TCR. It's probably my favorite category of racing. As I said earlier, I'm a bit of a front-wheel drive, chip on the shoulder kind of person, and TCR is one of the few places where you can see the likes of Honda Civics fighting Cupras, fighting Audis, and I don't know, I'm a big fan of how those cars look as well. I think it's just a really good time for touring cars again in terms of the silhouettes that they create, especially when a lot of the discourse in the likes of Formula One is, the cars are too big now, they're too heavy now. You can look at a modern touring car, whether it's a TCR or it's a BTCC car, and you can see the car that it evolved from. You can see one of the things that Jess, who sadly isn't here because she's having internet connection issues, tends to say is that when you grew up watching BTCC, the team you supported was whatever car your dad owned. And that's because you could see your dad's car on the track. Formula One, you can't really do that now. So I think maybe there's just a lot of that coming from the manufacturer side of things, where the silhouettes are just accessible is maybe the right word to say as a fan. I think there's that. There's just a lot of accessibility in the silhouettes of the cars at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And we maybe ought to just go briefly through the rule set, and because it used to be that you had really one rule set that worked for most touring car series, just pushing DTM out the side there, because that was always more of a silhouette series. But touring cars used to be Super Touring, and then they moved on to obviously the various regulation sets that we've got now, which suit various countries differently. But while most countries went with TCR or went with the regulation set that brought us World Touring Cars for a while, BTCC went, and I think it's the only country that runs it now, NGTC, Next Generation Touring Car. Neil, would you be brave enough to just give us a sort of brief primer of what NGTC is and why it's different to the others?
Sure, yeah. I mean, NGTC is interestingly named. They tried to drop that name a while ago because, as you picked up, Next Generation Touring Car introduced in 2011, right? So anyone who was born that year now is just leaving school. So it's already the last generation touring car series, really, but it still carries on. Most of it is driven by And when you say like reference to say TCR as a comparison, NGTC is driven by the fact that it's very much, and it's not the only one that sort of did NGTC. NGT is more a concept rather than a technical regulation set, where effectively all the subframes are built by one provider, and that provider has changed over the years. So it's not necessarily exactly the same as it was 16 years ago. Same gearbox. The only thing that generally is free is the engine, but it also used to be very much a case that most of the teams would run a spec engine. So while it's not silhouette racing because the car shape and the platform around it is a real road racing car, based on a real road car, the internals are quite spec. And that is a good cost control element and also a good element for the series to sort of keep a handle on how consistency and the equality of the racing is. Because if you've got different car shapes and different engine performances, that's what you see, say, in TCR, and we saw in the World Touring cars, the performance levels can be quite different. Now, World Touring cars, 1000 rather, it didn't care. If you built the best car, you could race it and win the championship with the best car. That's if you built it to the best car of the regs, that's fine. But TCR and BTCC with NGTC, they're all about equality. So if you build a better car, wasn't much of a point because we will tune your engine power or we'll tune your ride heights. Will get you to all behave the same. So it works very well in that you've got a nice set of reasonably, with a lot of equal comparisons, elements the same, the subframe, the chassis, and just some bits that vary that keep the manufacturers happy when you have the manufacturers, which is an important thing within BTCC because they're free from manufacturers. They're not involved. They're not getting in the way. They're not pulling people's arms and saying we need to be winning championships with our car this year. BTCC is a fully independent and fully successful privateer series.
Yeah. Georgie, one of the things I've enjoyed is seeing Jason Plato return to the grid, albeit with his own team rather than as a driver. Those Plato Racing Mercedes do look pretty good in the purple and white paint job, although I do wonder how much they're copying you lot, I have to admit. But one thing that he said was, they had a number of different car shapes and a number of different manufacturers on the slate that they could have used. Mercedes wasn't the first choice, but do you think? Would you agree that the grid of different manufacturers is actually one of the things that makes BTCC attractive? And would you? I mean, how do you feel about the fact that we've got basically a grid full of privateers, with the exception of one or two, semi-works teams? And does that actually make the racing better, the fact that we don't have full manufacturers anymore, Georgie?
To be honest, I think the racing speaks for itself. The racing at Donington was some of the most exciting racing we've seen for a while. Maybe that's because Formula One has been in its off-season at the moment, but I know a lot of the issues with Formula One relate to passing seeming artificial right now. Whereas you have performances in BTCC with the likes of Ash Sutton throwing the gimmicks out of the window, not using the boost and still winning. I think that shows a testament of how well the cars are balanced towards each other when they're not using the boost. I think is it 60 horsepower extra they get while using the boost. So, but you saw the likes of the Fords be really strong, and again, I think it goes back to a lot of people own Fords. A lot of people's families have owned Fords. They like seeing their car be successful. A lot of people own Mercedes. A lot of people like seeing their car be successful. I think it is fantastic to see a lot of constructors there, whether they're privateers or otherwise, because the racing it generates is exciting, and the sights that you see, again, they're accessible, relatable sights. They're cars that you see on the street every day, fighting the way that maybe you feel like you want to fight when you're on the motorway and someone's cut you off, but you just know you can't. You can see your Mercedes door that Audi that you really wanted to door, and you can feel a little bit better about your commute to work the next day. I think maybe that's why it's as successful as it is right now.
Yeah, quite possibly. And you mentioned the Ford Focus there. I mean, I think the shape of the Focus, particularly in those Napa colours, is possibly my favourite of all. But Ash Sutton, obviously the preeminent driver right now. The way not just that he won, but also the way that he drove from the back to second in the first race. He's clearly a class above most of the grid there. Has the rest of the world been sleeping on Ash Sutton? I mean, he's obviously happy in BTCC, and he's been doing it for many years now, but there was a time when he'd obviously get a world touring car drive, which isn't possible anymore. Is there still a pathway for these leading BTCC drivers to go off and do something else that's superior, or is this kind of the best show in town for them right now?
That's a difficult question, especially in my position, but I'll try and cover that one a little bit because I think for many British racing drivers, BTCC can be the best championship they can get to if it's not Formula One, right? Because, it's our championship in the UK. It's the second most watched motorsport in the UK. So if even going to say, I want to go and race in World Touring Car, still, is it a step up for those drivers? Sometimes it's not. But then obviously there are better balances with that, because obviously if you want to be a professional paid motor racing driver in touring car racing, driving for a manufacturer, that's where you need to go. So for Sutton, I think, he's experimented, he's doing a bit of GT. He did TCR briefly about 5 years ago, but just like 1 or 2 races whilst working with Volkswagen for development, I think. But I think he's happy where he is because he's made that work for him as a career path. But touring car drivers absolutely can work their way up to World Tour, because World Tour now is like the top tier of FIA touring car. We've got a British driver who won the European Championship where I work last year. He's made his way to World Tour this year. So there is a pathway for touring car drivers. The problem now is that BTCC is slightly off centre, in that BTCC is the UK's platform. If you want to be a world touring car driver, you need to sort of split yourself off and follow, go to Europe and then go to the world stage and follow the TCR route, because that's the top tier. I mean, there's no reason why Ash Sutton wouldn't just jump into a world touring car and be right at the front. But, unless he's shown the interest and done the race the car, that becomes more of a barrier for him to make that move. But again, whether he wants to is usually the question.
Yeah, and I think, Georgie, one of the reasons that I had slept on BTCC for so long was because I saw it as a series for UK drivers. I thought, well, that intrinsically means the quality isn't there that used to be there. But I think that was a mistake in many ways. I mean, if you've got a kind of a closed shop where the cream of British drivers feel they can't really do any better, without compromising their careers, that means that the cream of British drivers are obviously there. We see people like Turkington from maybe maybe the last era of touring cars, if you like. But there's obviously people like Sutton who have moved into their era during this rule set. I mean, would you say that the current driver crop of BTCC is probably the best that British motorsport has to offer? Would you say, Georgie, that they're doing the right thing by staying there, the very top drivers?
I think there's obviously a reason that they stay there, and that's because ultimately whatever it is that they're getting from the championship it's satisfying what they want from it. So you would only really look to move if, as Neil pointed out, if there was a reason to do so. If you're at what is theoretically the top level of competition for what is your category of motorsport, whether that's recognized as a world championship or a British championship, perhaps for me as a competitor, I want to be competing against the best drivers that I can compete against. If they're all British or if they're all Japanese or if there's a mix of different nationalities, doesn't really matter to me. It's the level of the championship. And I think on a cost, BTCC offers, probably not even controversially, one of the most bang for your buck racing series in the world. So I can see exactly why drivers would want to stay there. And if you're a British driver especially, you probably don't have to move home. You don't have to move away from your family, and you can still take part in what is ostensibly a world-class level motorsport series, whether it has that world tour recognition or not.
In terms of, Neil, in terms of teams picking a car, you mentioned that essentially most of the regulations are sorted before you get to that stage in terms of planning, but Plato obviously picked the Mercedes. PowerMax picked the Audi, for example. But when you get to that stage, do you have to inform the manufacturer that you're doing that? I say this because there is obviously the Ford Focus on the grid. That's not a car that Ford makes anymore. I think it's a massive mistake of them not to. But we are moving away now from that particular silhouette of car, as you have written about in the past. And I wonder, to what extent do manufacturers get involved in whether teams can run the car or not?
There's a couple of interesting points there, because there have been some rule changes this year that allow that Ford Focus to be on the grid, for one, because as you picked that, it's not only the fact that, the Ford Focus, I think, is still in production right now, but ending soon. But the Focus Saloon is not sold in the UK. And it used to be the case in BTC regulations after the Honda Integra of 20 years ago. The regulations said, no, you have to race cars that are in the UK. You can't just go buy one and build one based on a highly competitive shape that we don't have in our country. So, that removed super speedy coupes that we didn't have from the grid, like the Integra. But that's changed now because basically, as we can see in motoring, that saloons, small saloons, mass market saloons, even mass market hatchbacks are pretty much gone. So even the saloons in the UK, if you want a saloon in the UK, you buy a BMW or an Audi, you won't find a Ford, a Renault, Laguna. They're all out, they're all gone. And even hatchbacks are now getting into like small SUV territory as well. So we see some touring car championships, or more like stock car touring car based championships, are actually moving to crossover vehicles, but they're not. They have the name, they have the badge, but the shape of them is kind of in between. So the manufacturer for BTCC, they're not involved at all, but because they're not involved in the program. When they were, so when BTCC went to NGTC, the first sort of generation of cars we saw were like the Toyota Avensis, a lot of saloon-based cars, because that's what everyone wanted to see. We all love the old racing saloon, which I think was what you were alluding to earlier when you think you like the look of the BTC grid. You look at that last week's BTC grid, all amazing, beautiful saloon cars running around a track. The best aerodynamics you can get in a road car is a saloon. It's the best car to build, but manufacturers are selling hatchbacks and they make you race the hatchback. And now the manufacturers aren't involved, you race what you want. And the right car to race is a saloon. So apart from the Toyota Corolla, which has already been built with support from Toyota, everyone has a saloon now because the manufacturers aren't involved. And I've also heard instances before where some manufacturers have gone, how do I stop that car racing in the UK? No, you can't. There's nothing that you can do to stop it. You can race what you want.
Thank you for explaining. I guess the last question really on just the sort of background to BTCC is, I wonder if there's a reason why so many other touring car series, like we were talking about Swedish touring cars before we started recording, have had to fold or reinvent themselves or amalgamate. But BTCC seems to have a full grid, albeit with many drivers with budgets, and doesn't seem to suffer from an exodus of the top drivers and teams. For example, WSR, I know Dick Bennett's is 80 now, but WSR seems to be happy running the BMW to a high standard. It doesn't seem to have any single-seater ambitions in customer racing. I wonder, why do we have that situation in BTCC when maybe there's a bit of a brain drain in other series?
I think something that comes back to a little bit what we touched upon earlier is that BTCC is an old championship with a strong following. And that's one really key thing, and also good TV deal, good marketing, good profile in the country. Other championships, even though if they suddenly burst up a little bit and suddenly STCC was really big, it only launched in the late 90s. So when it disappeared, it was like a 20-year-old championship has disappeared. And Super Touring in Germany was 5-year spell and gone. If you haven't got that heritage to fall back on, it gives you less ability to recover from the bad years. So when STCC had its bad years, it's cascaded and collapsed. BTCC has had its bad years. I mean, you look in 2001, straight after Super Touring, was it 25 out of 26 wins by one manufacturer? And within 3 years, it was so close to dead. But it was, Alan Gow, the series director, came back in, brought in Super 2000 regulations, realizing this, we'll keep it going for a bit until we bring something else in. Brought it back to life, and it's now what it is now. So there's a lot of strong leadership, good heritage, good fan base. That if you didn't have all of those three things, I'd say BTCC's had a few opportunities to have disappeared as well. But all that perfect trifecta at least has kept it going, and where other series have not had that.
Yeah. So, Georgie, if we look at those first three races in Donington, I think they all had their highlights. But would you agree it was the Ash Sutton show? And is this, do you think, what we can look forward to for the rest of the season?
Definitely. Never going to be a person that's going to say, oh, he's going to win every race this year. Because as someone that's been on the esports side of that, some of the viewers may know, I think I've referred to this before. I run a esports championship where we do build our own cars to specific regulation sets that are born from real world regulations, and we've done a touring car regulation before. That was actually how we started our series. The first race, or the first round, we had 2 races, and my teammate Lilac's car was unbelievable. We thought it was going to dominate the entire season, and yes, she did win the championship, but it was very, very close into the final round. So I don't necessarily think that we're going to see the Ash Sutton show for the entirety of the season, and that this was a hallmark of what's to come. I definitely think we'll see a little bit more of this for sure, but maybe not all the time. If I was any of his competitors, though, it's not a very good thing to hear, is it? That your expectation of the season is, maybe he won't win every race. I think that still speaks a testament to how much, as you say, how much of the Ash Sutton show it was. It was an unbelievable drive to come from the back to second in the first race, and then to convert that to 2 wins in the second the second and third race. And just a flawless weekend, really, for him.
Well, and you mentioned, Georgie, as well, that you do love a good rear-wheel drive car. You must have appreciated Charles Rainford's stars, at least off the grid in race 2. That was something you only get from a rear-wheel drive, wasn't it?
Oh, like the starts in that race were one of the most exciting things about it, especially in the first race as well. I think one car got away really badly, and that forced everyone to take evasive action around them. Something about standing starts in touring cars, especially when we have the juxtaposition of front-wheel drive and rear-wheel drive cars against each other, smacks of what we're getting in Formula One at the moment with this Ferrari Tiny Turbo. It's fun to watch.
Yeah. And let's hope they don't regulate that Ferrari Tiny Turbo out of existence, or at least remove the advantage, because that would really be the reverse of everything the FIA has done for the last 70 years. But anyway, let's move on from that. But yeah, I mean, like the diversity of the grid is one of the good things. And I mean, even though obviously Rainford's lead lasted about 30 metres before Sutton used bumper tactics to get him out the way in a true touring car way, which I appreciated. Neil, I think the fact that WSR BMW can be so competitive off the start, even if Rainford is not a match for Sutton in terms of pure driving ability, I mean, it shows up the diversity of the grid and just how good those regulations can be, doesn't it?
Yeah, and how much they do a good job of making sure that you can have 2 different form factors competing is always a challenge. But we're so racing, and that's something they stick to. And a lot of racing drivers, I know you were saying earlier about I prefer front wheel drive. Many love rear wheel drive and think that's the way to go. TCR is all front wheel drive. That solves the headache. The fast start, because that's, as you say, the rear wheel drive gets away quicker. There are some changes, special like gear ratios that they use in the regulations to try and keep it a little bit equal, but it's still an inherent advantage that's still going to be there. But across the race series, across the race weekend, it balances out quite nicely. And I think also in terms of Ash Sutton show, it's not just the Ash Sutton show, because Tom Ingram is also, the current generation of drivers. Tom Ingram and Ash Sutton are the 2 there that people name to beat. They are the new Plato Neal or, Muller Giovanardi of the new era, and they're the ones to be watching this year. Tom Ingram sort of won race 1. There was a slight technical glitch or whatever that got him disqualified, and also finished 5 seconds up the road in the qualifying race, which we have now this year, and then had a penalty and lost that as well. So I don't think it's going to be a one-man show at all. I think the new Ford is going to be good, but that Hyundai and Tom Ingram is going to be completely there as well.
And well, you mentioned one of the big beast personalities there. Of course, Plato. One of my favourite old clips is Matt Neal threatening unconvincingly to knock Plato's lights out. But it's a different era now. I don't think they get away with doing that on live TV, unfortunately. But how well can Plato's team do? I mean, they obviously got a pole in the first race, but it's got to be tough for a new team, same as in any other series. I would have thought, Neil.
Yeah, it's tough, but obviously there's a lot of experience there. He hasn't just created it from new. He's, the way BTC works, it's a lot of family of smart engineers who will move around a lot more than they would if they were manufactured tied in. So you'll see a lot of people at Plato Racing who have been somewhere else very recently. So he hasn't just gone, boom, anyone know how to make a car? Because it's going to be, I've got this guy from even from the Ford team last year with him. So, and a lot of good drivers, he hasn't come in with rookie drivers. Daniel Rowbottom, Adam Morgan has been racing for, best part 15 years in BTCC as well. Put together a fantastic little program there. So that team is not as inexperienced as it looks. To get the car chassis, he's used RML, he used to build the Chevrolets, a World Touring Car, and the Nissans, the British Touring Car Super Touring era frame. So they also know how to put together a car as well. So there's a lot of experience behind that team. The only thing new about it is the name being on the grid, really.
Yeah. All right. Well, brilliant to have you on. Thank you, Neil. Hopefully speak to you again in the future, and good luck with everything you're doing this season.
Thank you very much, and thanks for having me on.
All right. Take care. All right, so Georgie, it was good to hear from Neil there, and I mean, I'll certainly be following the BTCC for the rest of the season because that first race, I mean, such good value for a spectator, I would have thought as well. 3 races in a weekend, plus the mini challenge, plus all kinds of other support events. I mean, this is the kind of thing that makes people come back to racetracks, isn't it?
What I really enjoyed about the coverage for the race or the races was that there was, after the races, published not just highlights but full race replays on YouTube in one video. And when you take the length of that video, it's about the length of a Formula One Grand Prix for all 3 races. But the amount of racing that they're getting in those 3 races, when you think about all the argy-bargy that went on, it's just the amount of racing that they get in. It's fantastic.
It really is, and it's just great to have so much racing available on free to air as well. I mean, it is my biggest complaint about Formula E's marketing over the last few years that it's been behind a paywall. Thank goodness they're finally fixing that in most markets. But this is something BTCC has never really ventured towards doing. I think it's always known that its market is going to be those bread and butter free to air viewers because, you know, fair weather fans are not going to follow it to a BT Sport subscription. You know, this is where it's best, isn't it?
Yeah, I definitely agree. It doesn't, maybe to go back to the likes of a privateer series, a manufacturer series, you know what I mean? It just doesn't feel like it would pull the same kind of subscription numbers that to a streaming service that the likes of Formula E, Formula One, or anything like that would. Because, as you say, it's bread and butter. We talked about before, it's the car that your dad drove. There's a very, I think, or at least I've always perceived that there's sort of a working classness to the BTCC that just isn't there in a lot of different kinds of motorsports. Whether that's because the drivers, a lot of them, as you say, are privateers, they're very much working to be there. I don't know, but yeah, it's just a fantastic series to watch at the moment, and I can't wait to see the next round as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So now it's just the 2 of us. Let's talk about Race for a Cause 24. You've obviously got the poster behind you. And by the way, the poster is created by excellent artist and person Cami Sturch, who for many years ran, I think, motorsport's favourite Etsy store. You could buy excellent prints of Ayrton Senna, Sebastian Vettel, lots of other things up there, and also the Abby Eaton print that's usually behind you when we do these podcasts, Georgie. But I think that Race for a Cause print, which is still available on the Redbubble store, is one of Cami's best. Yeah, she actually made that especially for the event, didn't she?
Yeah, we commissioned her to make this for us so that we could feel as professional as the likes of the ADAC, the Sim Expo from a couple of years ago that had her art, Autosport, all of these fantastic organizations that have made use of her services. We thought, she's been a long time friend of the team. We've had the Go for the Gap logo on the car since day one. So we wanted to get her on board to do some of the promo for the event. And as you say, it's fantastic, isn't it? It's been nice to, as much as Abby has been great there, it's great, isn't it? It's so good.
I think it's such a crowning moment to have the poster for your event behind you. It's something most people can't say. Of course, I've got a Cami print behind me, the Lando Norris print from Monaco. Actually, it's Daniel Ricciardo Monaco 2021. Yeah, and I'm so glad to see her doing well. Hopefully, get her on the pod at some point. But let's talk about Race for a Cause itself. We went through in some detail the Road to a Cause series, which was our way of raising the funding, or Prismatic's way of raising the funding necessary to get that on the road. And in the end, Race for a Cause 24 was successful financially for the charity that it was supporting, but I think we could say the racing was successful as well. I mean, what were some of your race highlights personally in the cockpit?
Well, actually, my team had a pretty quiet race, and if anything, that was quite nice as well, compared to some of our Road to a Cause antics, shall we say.
Just tell us which car you were driving and for whom.
I was driving the Prismatic Motorsports Community Ishtar team, which is a collection of the drivers from our Discord community. I drove with Addy and Julie and Aspen, and we had a really non-eventful race. We didn't even use the fast repair that we had. We did get into a couple little scrapes here and there, but it was mostly just long race, fatigue setting in, a couple of unforced errors here and there. You kick the car on a curb and put it in the wall, have to come and get your front right repaired, it happens. Other than that, I think at the front there was a little bit of racing between the Prismatic Motorsports Athena car, our headline car, as it were, in the Ferrari GTP, racing against the Taylor Mills Cadillac. TMR came away with the win, but there was some mid-race intrigue at one point where they had to come in for a penalty or a repair. As I say, I was a little bit busy running my own race at the time, so the details are a little bit fuzzy on why they had to come in, but there was definitely some mid-race intrigue. But as far as the GT3 category that I raced in went, Satellite, Alex Gall ran off into the distance and nobody ever saw them again. I think they maybe finished 3 laps ahead of the next closest car. They're insane. And a relatively similar story for Queen's Design in LMP2. They had a really good race. I think they came away at least 1 lap ahead of the next closest car. At Le Mans, that's 3.5 minutes on the road, so a dominant performance from the class winners in GT3 and in LMP2, and what probably could have been a dominant performance for TMR in LMDH, but maybe mired with a few incidents for them that made it look slightly less dominant than it actually was.
Yeah, and it's always good to see how much this means to people as well, because I think without meaning to, I sometimes make out that this, the Tour Cause races are a bit of a jolly, that they're something that you put together a team in for fun and you go out there and you have fun regardless of the result. But that's really not true. I bet people really do care about getting first or second or third in this. And to see the live coverage of Taylor Mills pumping the steering wheel and then emotionally saying how much it means to her that Prismatic have put together the event and that it's something, actually helping people of her kind. I just thought it was really nice to see that, to hear that kind of tribute and to hear someone, not just saying, yeah, great to turn up and win, but also, actually explaining how much the cause literally means to them. It's got to be good, hasn't it, to hear that kind of thing?
Honestly, that's why we do it. It's all about giving back to the community, and this is primarily the most transparent and forward way we can do that, is putting our money where our mouth is. The broadcast costs a lot of money, I will say. I won't get into how much because I think that would be unfair to the broadcaster, but it is expensive, and we put together a whole year funding campaign to get the funds together for that. And then to have the community of surrounding the race come and support it, it means the world to us to see that it's true what they say. I'm going to paraphrase Wayne's World. If you build it, they will come. And they do come. This is the 3rd year we've done it now. And every year we've beaten the donation record that we've set the previous year. And this year we raised 6,471 euros and 69 cents because our community think they're really, really funny. And admittedly, they kind of are. Especially after they made us say to Next Level Racing last year, the exact amount of money we raised from the raffle was 420.69. What a fantastic community we have. What a fantastic community we have.
I must admit, being potentially a bit neurodivergent, I did try and balance out the figures so that it was 0.00, and somebody kept putting 69 cents on their donation.
Somebody always does it. Admittedly, I did it at one point this year. I didn't do it last year. I think maybe it was Dustin that kept doing it last year, one of our community members, one of the drivers for L1 Racing. I think he did it this year as well. But it seems to be a mainstay of the culture of Race for a Cause now, is the donation must end in 69 cents. It's been like that for the last 2 years, and I don't expect it to change next year, put it that way.
Well, I think the commentators on Race Spot appreciated the reason for the humour as well. And actually, it's your 2nd year with Race Spot. I know, like you said, the broadcast costs a lot, but it's so good. I mean, like, I'm speaking in a self-interested way because I love commentating on these things, but it's so good to have a professional broadcast crew, isn't it?
I'll go back to again that I said that most of the classes were led by relatively dominant victories, and there's an obvious takeaway that you can take from that, and it's the racing was probably a little bit boring actually to watch. But by God, the race spot guys, they make it seem incredibly interesting, even in its least interesting moments. Not to say that the race wasn't a good race to watch or anything. I thoroughly enjoyed going back and watching the broadcast afterwards because, as I say, I was racing in the event, and it distracts me to no end to listen to the broadcast while I'm driving. I think at one point I did do that for about 20 minutes, and I heard one of the commentators refer to RFAC as RFAC, and I nearly put the car in the wall, so I had to turn it off. I was thinking to myself, we need to do a brand guideline so that everybody knows how to pronounce it next year. But like, that's not the kind of thought you need to have while you're driving, you know what I mean?
I couldn't listen to anything while I was driving. So, do you think people had mine and Jess's commentary on in the previous races?
Definitely. I did most of the time, actually. Going back to what you said with the Road to a Cause races maybe being a little bit of a jolly for some. As one of the organisers of the races, I was very much just there to sort of make up a grid position. I didn't really care where I finished. I just wanted to be there to enjoy racing the car, to race a car and drive a car that I hadn't driven a lot of, which was the LMP3, the Ligier that I was driving at the time, which I'd never driven before. I ended up finishing fourth in, I think, most of the races, so it wasn't a particularly bad performance for me, you know, but yeah, it was definitely a little bit more serious for Race for a Cause, shall we say.
Yeah, absolutely. And I definitely hope that this is a tradition that continues as well, because I think it was its third or fourth year this year of happening.
It's the third year.
Yeah.
We've done it twice now for Belong To, and the first year where we broadcasted it ourselves on our own Twitch channel, we did it in benefit of Rainbow Railroad.
Yeah. So I remember that first year. I remember it being a lot of fun. I remember how much money was raised for Rainbow Railroad, but €6,000 for Belong To LGBT Ireland, that's got to be, I think, beyond most people's expectations.
I know they were over the moon, and especially we were as well. When the event itself had finished, I think we were still sitting on around 5,500, and one donor came out of nowhere to donate over €650, I think it was, and push us over last year's total. Me and Jess were sat in a voice chat in the Prismatic Discord together, having a little bit of a debrief, and we were really, really happy with the event, but ultimately, like, slightly deflated that we hadn't beaten the target or the previous year's amount. And then that donation came in, and I opened a bottle of Prosecco. And and then even a week or two later, one of the event's partners, Drive Deviant, made another contribution. That's how we got up to 6,471, as they put in another €150 from their merch sales around the event, from the likes of the Race for a Cause t-shirts. If anything, it was sort of the gift that kept on giving. I think everybody looked at the 6,200-ish that had happened at the end of the race after that one major donor contributed, and everyone, oh, this is fantastic. And then later, when we got the Drive Deviant donation to push it up even further, that was even better. You know, I don't think anyone expected that one at all. Well, I did, because I was in conversations with them about keeping the campaign open long enough for them to be able to do it, but I don't think anybody else was expecting any more donations to come in, so I think that was a nice little surprise for everyone.
There might still be people who want to buy the cami print or want to buy some of the other merch available for the race. Maybe they took part, maybe they enjoyed watching. I'll put it in the description as well, but maybe verbally, how can they get hold of it?
So the print that you can see here, this is available on the Prismatic Motorsports Redbubble store. If you search on Redbubble Pris Motorsports, PRIS Motorsports, that is how you should be able to find our store. You can get it on a variety of different things. It doesn't have to be a print like this. You can get it pre-framed. This is a frame that my dad bought so that I could frame it. But you can purchase it with a frame directly from Redbubble, or you can get it on a mug or a t-shirt, or the world is truly your oyster when it comes to what you want to put this on, unless I haven't enabled that product, of course. You can't have it on a backpack because why would just wouldn't work very well, would it? But pretty much if anybody does want it on anything, all they really have to do is contact me, and if Redbubble offer it as a product, we can add that to the store as well. It's very, very easy to do so. But as I say, Redbubble's where you can get it, and if there is a product that you're looking for that you would want it on and you can't get it, for example, a notebook, I've heard a few people thought it would be good on a notebook cover, but I didn't really consider that myself. So if we do get a little bit of call for that, that's definitely something that I can put together.
Yeah, and I mean, I so enjoying being at least watching sim racing more closely and being involved in it in some way. So, I'm hoping eventually to do motion racing live streams involving some sim races, but that all depends on the audience. And from that point of view, I want to say, I know the audience is still out there because they still talk about it sometimes, but I also know that the algorithm is not serving us. There may be various reasons for that. I would be a conspiracist to speculate, but I think that simply putting posts on social media saying that the podcast is happening is no longer enough, because the channels are fragmented and not everyone's on X, not everyone's on Blue Sky, not everyone is anywhere anymore. So I'm going to fix that by putting out more short form clips. But I hope those of you who are watching or listening to this, if you like it and if you want to see us make more episodes in the future, which, I would love to do, but obviously, the more audience numbers we can get back from the previous era of the Motion Racing podcast, and, the more new followers we can get, the better. So please, word of mouth is the best form of marketing. So if you like it, then do share with your motorsport watching friends. I think one interesting thing that a regular on our Discord server said to me, Georgie, was, the world is such a terrible place to live in now that people are almost moving towards nihilism rather than escapism. And I think that's affected a lot of sports podcasts, a lot of sort of, TV and streaming specific podcasts. People do want to wallow in their despair a lot more rather than listen to escapism a lot of the time, don't they?
I saw a pretty interesting meme online recently that was, I think it was 2006, run to internet to escape reality. 26, run to reality to escape internet. And I think that's kind of true, it's to get slightly off topic from motorsport for a moment. It's more towards the human condition and a position in the world of technology. But you can tell I've got a degree in philosophy, can't you? I don't know. I think tech, the internet, it's became all pervasive in our lives in a very short space of time. I can definitely remember in my early adult lifespan, and maybe even my teenage years, as I say, going from effectively never using the internet to do much of anything to it being a constant presence in my life, whether that be it having a direct font of all knowledge in my pocket, whether that be talking to individuals like yourself over the virtual waves of the World Wide Web. There's so much connection now that there simply wasn't before. And I've seen another similar thing online, ironically online, that people are doing this thing where they put together an analog bag, which is you'll take a crochet project out and sit in a park and do that. And you'll leave your phone at home. And surprisingly, that's just how people used to live. But I think if we thought about that nowadays, that might be blasphemy to a lot of people to just leave your phone somewhere and to go out and be without it for a little while. So I don't know. Maybe there is an element of that to it. Maybe that we are experiencing a bit of technological fatigue at the moment. I can definitely say I've felt a bit of that recently. I haven't done any sim racing since the Race for a Cause, actually. I've just been far too burnt out with it, and I've barely even been online, to be honest, because of all of the exposure that the event and everything around it created. I think sometimes we do just need time to decompress and get away from the web, especially again, going back to COVID and things like that. We've been thrust inside for so long, and I think the internet's became so pervasive in our lives. Maybe that is an element of it, but maybe, again, you said before I'd be a conspiracy theorist to speculate, so maybe I'm just a speculative conspiracy theorist.
Well, I think everyone else is on the internet, so why not? I do keep getting sent in my Reels algorithm instructions on how to emulate one of these things as well.
Oh my God.
It's a 5th generation iPod. It's a 2005 model that I bought in 2006, and it's great to have. But at the same time, it's funny to see people go back to offline methods that once seemed antiquated. I think that there is a debate to maybe make another podcast about, and that this is a fantastic conversation. But I would love to know if what people are bored of is renting and putting power in the hands of streaming services. Actually, what we're seeing is a move back to collecting physical media, or collecting digital media even, that remains on the hard drive forever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's definitely, I've noticed that within our communities, there's a resentment towards this modern move towards a lack of physicality and a lack of ownership. To go towards video games for a moment, most of the things you buy on Steam, you own a license towards, and if they remove the license, you're kind of screwed, really. And that's what the campaign in Europe, is it Save Video Games or something like that?
Yeah, so some games like Driver San Francisco, it's now impossible to find unless you have the physical disc. I downloaded Forza Horizon 4 a month before it was deleted. So should I ever lose my Steam service, there's no chance of me getting that back. So yeah, it's kind of scary, the power that we put in the hands of tech companies these days.
It's Stop Killing Games. I remembered that's the name of the campaign, and I've noticed web stores in that sort of vein getting a bit more traction. When you look at things like GOG or Good Old Games, they are a DM-free store, so you own the software when you buy it. You still going to have to agree to an end user license agreement, like anything that's published, but the software is on your computer and they can't take it off without your say so. In recent years, GOG has gone from being a sort of small store to having all of the AAA titles that come out nowadays on it as well. It's a lot more than what it was, and I think it's down to that approach of just not really trying to hide anything. I think there's a lot of distrust nowadays with that kind of disingenuous business practice, or a lot of people feel that kind of business practice is a bit disingenuous, where you buy something and then I can just take it away from you even though you bought it. I think people have a lot of, as you say, people have a lot of issue with that, and maybe there is a bit of a return to physicality, or if anything, a return to a certainty of ownership, like an actually having of an asset.
Yeah. This is definitely a topic that we'll return to, and it's a lot of fun to do. But for now, I'll say thank you for listening to this BTCC and a little bit of Sim edition of the Motion Racing Podcast. Thank you also to those of you who donated to Race for Cause 24. Thanks to you, they raised a record amount of money and will hopefully continue next year as well. Georgie, when's the next time Prismatic Motorsports are involved in a series?
So we are currently racing in the Almeida Racing Academy Endurance Series, which is put on by our friends at FTR Events. Let me just check the schedule for when the next race is. The last race we had was at Mugello, and that was actually last week. Wasn't a very good race for us. Athena didn't manage to make the grid because of various commitments the drivers had, but that's fine. We get a drop round over the course of the 6-race season. But the next round is at Phillip Island on the 16th of May. It's going to be a 4-hour race. We're going to be there with our Athena and Minerva GT3 cars, and it should be a good round for us. Phillip Island's a really fun track.
4 hours around Phillip Island. That's good. That's going to tire out anyone with the force feedback. But I'm looking forward to watching that then. So thanks so much to everyone who watched or listened to this. If you'd like to like and subscribe on whichever platform you're on, would love that, and feel free to leave us a nice comment as well. But thanks very much to everyone, and we will speak to you soon.